This is the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom show, The Wake Up Call on WCOM-LP, Chapel Hill and Carrboro, 103.5 on your FM dial. We're live streaming at WCOMFM.org. You can also watch this show on the People's Channel after a week's delay on Thursday night at 10 p.m., Friday morning at 6 a.m., or Tuesday at noon. The show will also be available on our YouTube channel, Wake Up Call. I'm Mira Schwintzer here with our host, Lori Hoyt, Emily O'Hare on the camera, and today our special guests are Christine Ashley and Grace Dodge.
Thank you. We're sharing a microphone today because we're so happy we have two guests, mother and daughter.
In spirit.
In spirit. Okay, I was leaping to conclusions, but I make more mistakes that way.
No.
Anyhow, we're delighted to have them. I take it you're both Quakers, or yes, Quakers.
Yes.
We've had Quakers on before of great admiration. One of the, I think there's 4 peace churches, Mennonites, Quakers, and Brethren, and that's the extent of my knowledge.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect.
And we're going to be talking about the Friends Committee on National Legislation.
That's right.
And we're delighted to have you. Welcome.
So fun to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, so you know each other through the Quakers?
What do you want to tell the story?
Sure.
Okay,
So
let me hear the story.
we actually met in November at the FCNL's, the Friends Committee on National Legislation. Each year they have an annual meeting, including a Quaker Public Policy Institute on Capitol Hill. So we met last November at that institute where we were lobbying with a North Carolina delegation, in this case for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is essentially updated food stamps. And from there, we've been able to work together a little bit more on a few things relating to gun reform, as well as general lobbying initiatives.
Economic justice and lobbying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so you're a senior in high school,
I am.
and you're off in Washington lobbying.
Pretty cool.
Very cool. You got an early start. That's marvelous. So, so both of you were off lobbying with the committee of the Friends Committee on National Legislation, and boy, there's so much going on. There's so many things. We could spend our days in Washington, couldn't we?
Yeah.
If not in Raleigh, we
Yeah,
also could.
yeah.
So, and you were there, and you've been
Yeah.
working with.
I've been working with the Friends Committee on National Legislation for just about 4 years. I have a background in education and in schools, Quaker schools. I was a middle school principal and a head of a Quaker boarding school in Iowa. And I just fell in love with the Friends Committee on National Legislation, which was formed just over 75 years ago. And it basically has 4 principles, which we stand by, and that's what all the advocacy work is really coming from. These 4 principles include: we seek a world free of war and the threat of war. We seek a society with equity and justice for all. And we seek a community where everyone's potential may be fulfilled, and we seek an earth restored. So from these principles, we believe that all of our stories, all of our truths are what we need to bring before Congress. Like, we're just ordinary people, but we can do extraordinary things, as you were telling me, and both of us earlier, including the story of Jane Addams, where she was trying to prevent war, right?
Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom was started by Jane Addams.
That's just a wonderful testimony, basically, to the fact that today, Grace and I wanted to come in because we wanted to get the message out there that you don't have to be an expert to speak with Congress. You don't have to be a professional lobbyist, which is kind of a bad word in many circles, to lobby. Like, the work that we're talking about doing is basically saying, we need to speak truth to power, and we need to bring our stories out so that people know, like, this is what we put you in office for. Like, we have very specific legislative asks which we want to bring forth and make sure that our representatives are hearing us loudly and clearly. So I was thrilled to meet Grace in November, where she actually was the leader of 19 North Carolinians in putting this group together and then bringing them into, how many offices did you go into?
Good question. 3-ish?
Yep, I know you went to Tillis's office and Senator Burr's office as well, and
I visited possibly Walker's office.
all right.
Wow.
Yeah. But we were really excited after meeting each other to think about how could we continue to do the work locally. And when I found out that Grace was working in her school to on gun violence and gun reform, I thought this is fabulous. Let's see, Grace, if you can take that work that you did in DC and bring it home for our high schoolers. You don't have to
Yeah.
wait to start to lobby.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Well, and so you've been 4 years with the Committee on National Legislation, and before that, I take it you were probably an activist of some sort too.
Yeah.
Maybe busy
yes.
working and
Yes. So as an educator, it became clear to me that we need to connect the dots, and our young people are actually, they don't have to wait to start to take hold of the fact that the present is determining our future.
Yeah.
We don't have
And their future.
and their
particularly.
future, right? So it's
Particular.
very important that right now we think about ways that we can allow our young people in particular to bring their messages up and
Yeah.
out, and especially with gun reform. And I think in your high school, this was huge.
Yes, so
Well, this is dear to our hearts. Now, we had a group of young people, maybe it was last year, about gun reform. I think probably you know them.
the Enough CHC. maybe?
Yeah, I'm not sure. They were from Chapel Hill. They were from some of the high schools, and I think
Right.
one friend was from Orange, the county, but most of them were for our local high schools. And they were working with the Moms Against Gun Violence.
Yes. So that is an organization or a group of people that I do know a little bit about. I primarily in a school work with the Save Promise Club, which is a national organization. It's a collaboration between Students Against Violence Everywhere, which is a club that was founded actually in 1989 in Charlotte after a student died by an act of gun violence, and recently has joined with Sandy Hook Promise. And so in our school, we do a lot of work against truly violence of any sort, but FCNL has been a great resource for us in being able to take our work from within the school to expand it to true lobbying in Raleigh, to DC, wherever we can go. And so working with them, especially, we've been able to bring a lobby training to our school, especially for our club, which was super helpful and was really educated.
Wait, so the name of your club again is?
It's the Save Promise, which is,
Safe Promise.
yes, and it's between Sandy Hook Promise, which is the organization out of Newtown, Connecticut after
Yes.
Sandy Hook, and Students Against Violence Everywhere, which was out of Charlotte in 1989, and
Okay.
they've joined together recently.
Okay. And what was the other group?
The group I think you probably spoke with was Enough.
Yeah.
I think it's maybe Enough CHC, but as I recall last year, they were part of the group that organized the walkouts on
Yes, they were
March
working.
14th and April 20th.
They were working on that, and
Right.
they also were. When they came, there had been a legislative lobbying with the Moms Against Gun Violence, so they
Right.
piled out of this car with these red T-shirts. We had about 6, and so we played musical chairs.
Oh, awesome.
In terms of getting up
Absolutely.
to the mics and stuff. So we're always thrilled to get young people on because, like I said, we know a lot of older people, but we don't know a lot of young people of this age. We either know the ones who are too little, who are grandchildren, or et cetera, et cetera. So we're just delighted, and I'm just so delighted that there's all that going on at your school. Two groups, and it sounds like you
Yeah.
collaborate together some.
We do some, and it's awesome, to have as many people working on this issue from as many sides as possible is
Yeah.
key, whether it's in the schools, on Capitol Hill in Raleigh.
Yes.
It requires a community effort. It takes a village, as they say, right? So it's amazing to see so many young people stepping up and taking that lead. As a Quaker in my meeting, my mom has been to the Quaker Public Policy Institute way more than I have, but with her I've been able to lobby from a young age. I don't remember the first time I went with her.
Really?
But being able to carry that into high school and getting more young people involved has been incredible to see everybody stepping up and speaking up.
Well, it's amazing the positive thing with your mother getting you started at a young age, so it wasn't something foreign or strange to you, and that then you could bring other young people to think in those terms, which is really great. And it's a reminder to all the mothers out there: get your children started
Soon.
young. Yeah.
Start
Sooner than
young.
later.
Yeah.
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 And I think, Grace, you brought up something that's really important for us to underscore. You know, we're a Quaker organization, but we're not a Quaker-only club, and we're nonpartisan. So we really invite friends from all across the different political spectrum to join in wherever they feel called or led to actually do some of this advocacy work. And I think the thing that we were talking about before we actually came out here was like, why are Quakers led to do this? And I think the thing that we know is that transformation is possible, and that can happen, and that's needed to heal our world.
Yes.
That we must depend on this, like deep in our hearts.
Yes.
The understanding that the world that we live in is not actually the world that we believe is the one that is the only world possible. Like we have a
Yes.
vision of something that is possible, and we think that it's possible for us as a human body to make change possible.
And that's why I think that the churches can be separate from partisan politics. Not that they always are, some aren't, but that's a place that hopefully very often is working out of a spiritual commitment for justice and peace, and that doesn't mean it has to be Democrat or Republican in terms of partisan. And just like the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, we're not for the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but we're strongly for justice and have these core values that similar to the Quakers, for equity for all people, and that's what we're committed to. And I think that's a deeply held passion, and it goes beyond partisan politics.
And especially in this time that we're in, this is a very troubling time where we've got people that we're pitting against each other in society. And so where is it that we can find some common ground and then operate from there? And so the work that the Friends Committee on National Legislation really depends on is ordinary people, you and me, building relationships with our members of Congress. And in the point of building relationships, we're looking for common ground, and we're also looking to be listening ears, as well as folks who can bring truth and speak truth to power, and do it in a way that says, we may agree to disagree, but we're not going to walk out the door. We're going to stick in this conversation and dialogue until we make some change.
And we may disagree with you, but we will treat you with respect
Right.
Exactly.
and courtesy, because that's no way to win friends is to start berating the other with names and denigrating words.
Yeah.
And would that certain people high up in politics would remember that, it demeans the whole process.
It is.
So one of the things I think that is really possible and an opportunity for this Congress, the 116th Congress right now, is the fact that the House did just pass H.R. 8, which is universal background checks. And now there's an opportunity to bring, it's called the S-42, to bring this to our Senate and to ask that universal background check is passed. And we think that after 5 years of inaction in gun reform, that we actually now have a possibility. Once February 13th came around and the Judiciary Committee, passed this bipartisan background check piece of
So that was
legislation.
bipartisan.
It was bipartisan.
That's so
Yeah.
heartening.
So we've got a real opportunity right now, and I think Grace and I were really excited to come on. And I think Grace, you have maybe more of a story to tell from your community of how is this particular piece of legislation resonating with young people? It's resonating also in all sides of the parties.
It is. So I live in Alamance County and go to school in Chapel Hill. So my communities have always been rather disparate in their political leanings, but I've been able to see both sides very literally. And
Yes, it's a stark difference in those two counties.
it often is. And yet, working with SAVE and being able to lobby specifically for S42 and, it is S42 now, that we, with our group of SAVE members, were able to visit Raleigh in April, I believe, and we did a conference call with Senator Tillis's office in DC where we were lobbying on behalf of S42. And so being able to talk to his legislative assistants and truly have a discussion about why S42 is so important to us as the universal background check bill. Background checks actually are nearly universally supported. I think there's an Elon study that showed about 90% of North Carolinians do support background checks, including Republicans. So being able to have that discussion with people in DC, people who we traditionally view as being the man upstairs or the big ones in power, was really important for us to be able to say, our school, we've been privileged, we haven't had actual active shooter incidents, although I know Carborough Elementary recently did. We had a gun threat that resulted in 52% attendance. And it's even things like that the threat of the possibility has such an impact on our education, and that's just within the school. There's communities across the state and across the country that face the issue of gun violence on such a personal level every single day. And so talking to those people in DC and truly telling them, this is what we want to see. We want universal background checks. We want S42 to make it out of the Judicial Committee, which Tillis sits on, and pass the Senate. It would be incredible for our generation, especially. Our lives have been marked by gun violence, and to see the concrete steps taken to help that stop would be incredible. Just seeing it pass the House is a great first step, but it's not the whole story.
Well, it gives you some energy and hope. That yes, this can happen, and if it can happen there, by gosh, it's a chance it could happen in the Senate also. And and for them too, they have to take that into consideration and think, okay, some of my cohorts, other Republicans are moving in that direction. I mean, that we're so influenced. It's all interconnected. We're all influenced by each other. Well, that is really heartening. So, what got you started on gun violence besides being a Quaker? Was it the Dorothy Stoneman Douglas School, or were you before that?
So, for us, Students Against Violence Everywhere as an organization has always been connected to many forms of violence. When the joiner with Sandy Hook Promise happened, our focus shifted a little bit to now we still look at as much as we can, but their resources are so tailored to gun violence prevention in many forms. So whether that's legislative, whether it's bringing programs into schools that help teach students and teachers how to be on the lookout and how to safely address these issues when they come up, that for us really started us being able to expand our reach, to do the lobbying, to do the research, and have the resources to really look into stuff like that more.
And it's always heartening when you see that other young people around the country, I mean, when there's more energy going.
And mobilizing.
And mobilizing, absolutely,
Organizing.
yeah.
I think think one of the things that we think is really important too is we need to educate members of Congress that this issue needs to be addressed as gun violence is something that happens daily. It's not just after a mass shooting occurs that we need to address this issue. And the other thing that I think is something that we don't really talk about a whole lot. We were talking earlier about the fact that in North Carolina, I think it was 62% of the firearm deaths are suicide. So nationally, it's more than half of the deaths are with firearm deaths are coming from suicide, and it sounds like in North Carolina it's higher. And so we think that this may be suicides. There's other deaths like accidental shootings, or gun violence. The thing that was important, I think, for us when we were talking about the universal background check legislation, it's an important start. And 14 other states actually have this state legislation. Connecticut found that after passing universal background checks that their deaths by gun violence went down 40%.
Really?
So that's a significant stat that actually sees that this is actually a public health crisis. And that we need to look at the fact that universal background checks is really about protecting one another from a whole host of violence, whether it can come from mental health issues, depression, domestic violence, etc.
Yeah, so much of the emphasis is on the schools, but I'm glad you brought up there's the issue of suicide, having a gun. You know, a lot of times suicide attempts can be rectified if somebody's taken some pills. You can find them in time, but once it's a gunshot wound, that's pretty final, and that's an interesting statistic too. And especially, you know, that coincides with this whole thing about the mental health issues with young people that is increasingly finding. It was just in the News and Observer yesterday or the day before that the pastor from Poulin, the youth minister from Poulin Church, was saying that Broughton High School, which is kind of where a lot of the affluent end of town, that the depression and anxiety rate and potential suicide rate, people talking about suicide, was really high, and he was brought that out to the public. So,
Right.
you know, so this, all of this, again, the interconnection, all of this ties into the availability of guns.
Absolutely does.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know whether you mentioned one of the core values was restoring the earth.
Right.
And this is now also, have you noticed in just the past year that even some of the regular media are beginning to talk more about climate crisis instead?
That's right.
Where it was like this
That's right.
silence earlier.
Yeah, and I would say that the Quakers and the Friends Committee on National Legislation approximately 5 years ago didn't see that conversations were happening across the aisles, and so actually started a bipartisan climate caucus. And actually Representative Costello from Pennsylvania was very instrumental in this as well. A whole host of Democrats and Republicans then joined this bipartisan climate caucus, and it was called the Noah's Ark because you had to come with somebody from the other side of the aisle.
Really?
So it was a 2x2 thing, and I think that caucus was groundbreaking in a place like DC, where there seems to have been an increasing rhetoric to push people onto one extreme or the other. The Climate Caucus was set up so that it was about conversation, monthly meetings, and the people who were part of it didn't agree on everything, but they could agree that climate change was real and that we needed to do something about this, and that it was a human product.
Wow, so this is the thing you wish you'd hear about more with the news. You know,
Right.
they spend so much on some trivial things too often. And So that was 5 years ago.
Right, and so now the organization, if you go to fcnl.org, you can go on the search button there and just put climate change. Now there is actually legislation that we're working on that is going to include carbon taxes, and this again is it's having some kind of bipartisan support because relationships have been formed. You know, we have to figure out a way to talk with one another and just sit with one another and hold the discomfort of the fact that we don't have easy fixes, we don't have easy answers, we don't agree on everything, and yet we're going to have to find some common values, some core principles that we're agreeing to, so that we can do something. And Bea Finn from ICANN, she was the Nobel Peace Prize winner. She was saying, you know, that's their idea. It's a nuclear disarmament organization, and she said, what we tell our folk are, you just got to do something. And we find that at FCNL, like, we are inviting people to take an action. Once you take an action, you can see like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah.
I can do this, you know. I can send an email. I can make a 2-minute phone call. I can meet somebody and say, hey, should we go to our in-district office and say, we're concerned about this. This is how we feel. What do you need us to do to support you to make sure that Congress and legislation is taking place to support this?
So the things that the shortcut is FCNL. Is that?
Yes.
FCNL.org.
Yes.
And you'll see there's 10 different legislative priorities, which include criminal justice reform, immigration, refugees, nuclear disarmament, economic justice, which has been also health and food security oriented, and of course gun reform.
Yeah. So what are you particularly working on? Grace is working particularly on gun issues. What are you? Do you have a particular thing that
niche? Well, so my job is I'm the Quaker Field Secretary. So my work is to go out and be amongst friends and engage and invite people to be part of the organization, see how easy it is. So we've got a few different grassroots pathways right now in which people can engage. And one of them is to join something called an advocacy team. And right now we've got 107 of these teams all over the country. And they are working right now on one legislative ask, which is to repeal the authorized use of military force. We need to stop these endless wars. We're worried that Congress is not doing its job if the president can go ahead and unilaterally send troops without congressional approval.
Okay, we're going to come right back. We're having a station break. I forgot to warn you about that. Catch your breath. We'll come back to.
All right.
This is Will's Wake Up Call on WCOMLP, Chapel Hill and Carrboro, 103.5 FM. You can stream us live at WCOMFM.org.
Okay, this is the time for announcements, so if either of you have some announcements. I want to announce that next week we're going to have Al McShirley on, who has been the legal, I think he's retired from it, but I'm not quite sure about that, the legal, main legal person with the state NAACP. And he is going to be featured in a movie that we're going to be showing on Monday the 10th. And the place and time will be announced next week. I think it's going to be at the Varsity, but it may be the Chelsea, so we'll let you know next week. But he's going to be here next Wednesday. And that's going to be on the 10th, the movie. He's going to be here next Wednesday to tell you more about it. And we're very excited about that. And also to let you know that many of you may realize that Ramadan has been going on. And we have a local Muslim group that meet here in Chapel Hill, and they are going to break their fast on Saturday night about 8 o'clock, and they're inviting the community to come this Saturday night when they break their fast and join them as they're celebrating that. If you're interested in going, Miriam Thompson, who's one of our Wolf sisters, will give you the information. And Miriam's number is 1-917-825-0884. 917-825-0884. They would just be delighted. They're very much outreach to the community and are really wonderful, delightful people. And I think it's so important that we've been talking about getting to know people who may be a little different religion, different race, different church. And I think that's so important to have that communication and that conversations together. So this is an opportunity with our local Muslim sisters and brothers. So that's all that I have. I guess that's it for announcements. Back to our guests. We're talking to Christine Ashley and Grace Dodge, who are both Quakers, who are working with the Friends Committee on National Legislation, which many of you will have heard about because it's been going, I just found out for how many years, 75 years.
That's right.
And I know I've been hearing about it forever, and they have a terrific reputation, and their reputation is because they're very thoughtful, it's nonpartisan, and they really do great research on the issues and are in the forefront of advocacy on these issues that they are particularly wanting to have some say and input on. So Grace and Christine have been to Washington and are both working hard on issues like gun control issues. Now we're talking with Christine about the issue about the military, which is something that is dear to Wolf's heart too, so maybe we'll go back to that and tell us again about that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the authorized use of military force is basically something that was brought into play with President Obama. And Congress has never repealed this. And the danger in this piece of legislation is that the sitting president can decide unilaterally whether or not to send troops and where to send troops.
Yes, and that started during Bush after 9/11.
Yes, after 9/11.
And that was supposed to be the impression, or the thought was that this is like a one-time thing because we were in a huge crisis because of 9/11. So he was given these extraordinary powers. And unfortunately, when Obama took power, he decided to coast along on that. And that was a bad decision. And now we have Trump, who's also wanting to use the decision from 2001 or 2001. This is 2019, and we're not in an existential threat for our country
Right,
at all.
right.
And
So do the math. Grace has never lived in this country where there was no war. And so we're talking about, we need to stop these endless wars.
endless war.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you're 17 or 18,
19
all
years of
you
war.
know is a country that has been at war. That's
And that's a chilling
really
thought.
shocking.
You know, we did go pretty quickly from one war to the other, but at least there were a few years in between that you were hoping that would continue. And now it's just one after another. Only they don't call it war. I guess they call them military actions.
Incursions or actions.
Yeah.
Right.
They you know, but by any other name, a war is a war.
Right.
And
So FCNL in the last, I guess, 5 years has really seen the immediate and urgent need to build up grassroots advocacy. So Right now, we've got a pathway that's called Advocacy Teams, in which those 107 teams across the country are all working on establishing relationships with their members of Congress and working with their members of Congress to understand the inherent issues and dangers of reauthorizing the AUMF, the Authorized Use of Military Force. So the other thing that FCNL has done, which is really cool, and this has been for probably about 11 years now, is inviting anywhere from 300 to 500 young people to come into Washington, D.C. and lobby every March for 4 days. So Grace was actually on the cutting edge because she's been coming with her mom. You know, she's a perfect person. Anybody can come. We had 500 young people from 38 states come in March to work on immigration reform. And so you can imagine how incredibly transformative that opportunity is. I know I've got a 23-year-old, he's gone a few times now, and he's used that word, transformative, to be in a room with that many young people who are, many of them in DC for the first time, who are going into their congressional offices and telling their story and saying why they care and why this matters to them. Whether it's immigration reform or criminal justice reform, it is incredibly powerful. So that's an invitation for young people, and we've had middle schoolers, high schoolers. It's a program primarily set up for college-age students, and it goes up to about age 30. We have people in their 40s who want to come, and we're like, no, come in November. We want this like a young people's forum. And so we're really serious about growing the opportunities and the possibilities for young people to actually start in grassroots advocacy work.
That's absolutely wonderful, getting started young like that and getting to feel more confident about it, because when you're older, and like I was, getting started and actually being involved, it's a little intimidating, knocking on a door, and but that way you'll be pros at I can do that. That's terrific, and I think with the climate crisis that we're in, I think young people are really realizing that the older generation is not taking care of them, not looking out for them, and I think Greta Thunberg has set such a great example. She's not the only one. Obviously, there's all these young Quakers doing stuff and other young people, but she has certainly also been an inspiration to many people, and so there's been. So I think this is the age of the young people. I mean, really, I think this. If you're going to think about time looking for the person of the year, I mean, I think next January they should put this as the year of the young people, out on the streets and out knocking in doors in Congress and demanding change. Whether it's guns or climate or all these issues that it's going to are affecting their lives.
Right.
Tremendously.
I'm wondering if you could describe, Grace, how you inspired some of your classmates to even take up this idea of going and lobbying.
Well, it certainly wasn't just me, but it's always great to have the resources from the older generations, from FCNL, to bring into your community. We always look to our role models, our parents, our teachers, our community leaders, people in our churches, to follow their lead, and at the same time recognize that it's our lead to take. While learning, we have to do. So for me, being able to work with FCNL to bring in Eric Ginsberg and do a lobby training at our school within SAVE was really impactful, because it allowed people my age and younger to see how to take meaningful action. And at the same time, we've learned how to do lobby trainings. We also know that that's not the only way to take action and to be impactful. We've all waited to turn 18 so we can vote. I can't wait. I get to vote in my first election. But we also know we can bring in voter registration to our schools. It's not very hard. You do a form and you mail it in. You can do it if you're 16. We can do voter registration, we can do lobbying, there's no age limit on lobbying. We can bring the programs in from Sandy Hook Promise and teach people how to recognize signs of potential gun violence of any sort. We can also take to the streets, we can protest, we can go to the marches like the Red for Ed march, we can go to anything, essentially. There's nothing that we cannot do. The one limit for people under the age of 18 is that we can't vote, and people are learning that just because you can't do this one thing doesn't mean you can't do all of the rest.
But Grace, what I'm interested in too is the school. So in other words, to organize at school, you have to have a way to get in touch with the other young people, or and also to have permission to, I guess, to use a room or a space.
Right.
So I take it that the school's been pretty supportive.
Yeah, we have a new principal this year, and our principal in past years too. They have all been very supportive of young people being able to take up their voices and stand up for what we believe in. So as a club, we have a specific room that we can be in, but other teachers have also been very generous in offering their rooms. Everybody within the school wants to see our students succeed and live and thrive. And so they're all very generally supportive of helping us find the resources that we need to have a space and to use our voice.
That's wonderful. And so you said you brought somebody in to help teach you all. That was somebody from
FCNL, yes.
CNL?
That I also,
Great.
yeah, that was Eric Ginsberg, who I also met this past November.
Uh-huh.
So this past November was great for me.
No, look at that. So did Eric then help you know how to organize this?
Yeah.
Because it's not easy to be an organizer.
So he presented us with a whole outline for planning a lobby visit, going through with it, following up, and seeing that for us is super helpful. And just really having the education, that base to build on, it's stepping stones.
Yeah.
It allows us to say, okay, this is what we can do, this is manageable, I'll email these people, you check with the field trip form things. I didn't do that part. But having something like that laid out for us and having that education brought in and having the resources to do it from FCNL, they do the lobby trainings for free.
So,
Right.
yeah, you can actually find all of these wonderful resources online at fcnl.org.
Yeah.
And you can go in the search bar and you can just say lobby roadmap, or you can look at advocacy tools. And right now, actually, Grace and I were just talking about this pilot project that we have, which we're calling them FCNL meetups, in which we're saying, we're inviting people to have an hour gathering a month. Just bring whoever, decide what you want to, what you care about, and we're offering an hour of our training folk to basically meet with those people who are the meetup motivators, to bring information back to that group. And so we're thinking, like, how can we help spread the wealth of resources that we have? So we have them online. We're also offering a once a month opportunity to talk to our staff and take every month a new step, a new action. So actually, we have a national call tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. If you went on to fcnl.org/motivators, that's with an ORS, motivators, you can sign up for the call and you can see if this is for you. I think that's the coolest thing right now that I see is we have so many opportunities to kind of share resources and try to cultivate an open environment. And we're saying you can do this too, because again, this is like ordinary people doing extraordinary things. We don't have to be the expert. I've been saying we should not be victims of perfectionism. We should really think about, what is it that matters to me, and why is it that my story matters to my members of Congress? And they do. So I don't know, that was just something I was just thinking about as you were speaking. If you have an Eric Ginsberg in your life, that's so cool. And you don't have to wait. You can actually you can communicate to me. I'm really easy to find. You can go online.
So tell our, and we'll do it again at the end. So how do they get in touch with you? How?
Oh yeah, so I'm super easy. Christine at fcnl.org.
Okay, Christine with
a CH at fcnl.org. And I'm really happy to connect you with any number of grassroots opportunities, whether you're 13, 30, or I'm trying to think of who our oldest lobbyists might be. I think we've had people in their 90s who've been doing this for decades. So there is no age entry level.
It's amazing. We were at the Quaker Public Policy Institute and they had everybody stand up if it's your first time, stand up if it's your 10th time, stand up if you've been here 25 years or more. I'm like, oh my goodness, you've been here more than you've been alive. It's awesome. It's incredible to see how many people get involved and stay involved for so long through FCNL and through other organizations. But
that's really wonderful. I mean, I know the Quakers. I mean, part of the history is being involved in justice issues.
That's right.
And also, from the very beginning, women played a very important role. They really believed in equity way back then for women.
Yep, look up Margaret Fell and see where she was petitioning her king for justice. So it's a very interesting thing to see how Quakers and the Religious Society of Friends is also in that space right now where we're trying to be open and welcoming to and extroverted, which Quakers are not always the most extroverted of folk. So how do we make sure that people of any background can join in this work?
Yes, you don't have to be a Quaker, folks. We didn't need to imply that.
Yeah.
Just as somebody who's passionate about wanting to make a better world, and there's so many issues. I mean, some people maybe, as I said, like, what is your particular niche or focus? Because there's so many, and they are interconnected. But each one of us, there's a few that we are more drawn to, that draws our heart more deeply than some others. And but there's so many issues out there that are all connected, that are so critical.
And I think that's a really good point. Like, we don't have to do it all as well. And when you're part of a community doing this work, I can rely on the fact that Grace is doing the work that she's called to do. And her work has been really in gun violence and gun reform. And so that releases me then from thinking I have to do it all. Which, what a burden right now. Because there's way too much for any one of us to shoulder. So I think being part of a community and community organizing is a way to keep going. Because this could be a burnout time too, right? This is heart aching. This is breaking open the heart time, right? And so how do you keep doing this work when it can seem so overwhelming, so despair-making? So we need one another.
We need one another, and I think the point you were just making, that not one of us can do it all, but do something.
Do something.
And rather than gnashing your teeth or weeping and crying or storming up and down your living room and wanting to break your TV or whatever, get involved, even in small ways. You feel so much better. That's the antidote to depression and apathy, is to say, okay, I can't do it all, but I'll make this phone call today, or I'll do this, or write that letter, or
and I guess we're in the business of stoking love.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. That's a way that will draw us.
Keep us going.
Yes, to get the energy from each other, because it's interactive, and by oneself, not one of us has that much power. But whether it's with FCNL or for us with the Women's International League, because we're also a multi-issue organization, and that's just at one of our last meetings. We went around and that was brought up about, one would say, I'm so glad you did this because that takes, I know that's being taken care of, or somebody does
Right.
that, it's sort of, it's such a comfort to know, just people working on the environment, well, that, just hearing about it, that makes me feel part of that, and this one's working on immigration, and this one's working on labor, and, and we're all in it together, that's,
I do have a very quick story, which is, Grace is talking about the fact that her school group actually you did a trip to Raleigh,
We
is
did
that right?
to Raleigh, correct?
Yeah, and you've done a phone call with Tillis, Senator Tillis's office. It's really easy to make a 2-minute phone call. And there's a phone number, you can write it down. It's 202-224-3121. That's 202-224-3121. And that will lead you to an operator in DC, and you just give your zip
is
code.
this for the Senate or the House of Representatives?
They'll get you to either one.
Oh, either one,
Mhm.
okay, 'cause I.
And basically, you can use your 2-minute phone call again to just say who you are. I'm Christine Ashley. I live in Hillsborough, and I'm really concerned right now because I've got 9th graders who I'm thinking I want them to go to UNC, but I'm really concerned. There seems to be an overabundance of some gun violence and access to guns happening in the local college here, and I'm wondering what the senator is going to do about that. And I would suggest that the senator takes a really good hard look at S-42 because it's proven that actually universal background checks do reduce gun violence. So that it's that simple. And if you have if you have that time to do a 2-minute phone call every week, it can have an impact. I got a call from a prenatal nurse in Michigan who called me up and she said for 6 months she'd been calling and she actually wasn't even getting through to human beings anymore. She was just getting the voicemail, right? But she called me up in January about, I guess it was a year ago, and said staffer called her and told her because of her calls that the member of Congress was going to take a good hard look at some specific provisions for protecting SNAP, and I was blown away, right? Because we don't really know the power of our voice and the power of our stories, and sometimes we don't get that feedback, and I'm like, oh, that's it, a 2-minute call every week, I can do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's many ways. There's letters, there's phone calls, which are the sort of the easy thing.
Mm-hmm.
There are emails, although it's been questioned whether that's as effective, but then I heard it could be. So, but anything.
They are. Just personalize the subject line and
Yeah.
include your story again, 2 or 3 sentences.
Yeah.
So they are, and they're, the Congressional Management Center actually has statistic that comes out that says, those emails, those stories, those calls are important. And most important, Grace going in with her group to do an in-district lobby visit, that's more impactful than a professional lobbyist.
Yes.
Grace and her friends going in.
Anybody in Congress can find any of the statistics that we can, and they can probably find more. I'm not sure. But hearing the personal stories from us and seeing faces that go with the numbers for their district will always leave an impact on local representatives, for state, federal, whatever it is. Hearing from their people directly, I'm Grace, I go to school in Chapel Hill, my mom works in the Chapel Hill school system. It means a lot to me to keep this district safe, to keep our schools safe.
Yes.
If they hear that, if they can put a face to the issue, it will always mean more. Hearing that voice, hearing those stories is what people will remember and what they'll hold with them. The numbers are great. I love numbers. I always bring the numbers with me, but it's the me, it's the us that truly bring the impact.
So all of this is helpful. Protesting is helpful. Going in person, lobbying is one of the most helpful. That you're right, seeing that person there, that they took the time to come and knock on your door, your office door, is very impactful.
And I would say, this is messy work, right? Because, the perfect piece of legislation is going to be hard to come by right now. So this is the work in which we're trying to find common ground. We're trying to find way forward. We're trying to step towards like a vision of possibility and opportunity. So S42, for example, if this can get passed through the Senate, and we need Senator Tillis and we need Senator Burr to pick up S42, that will show that in the last 5 years that the voices who've been calling for gun reform, we're making headway. And so this is a long haul.
Yes.
Yes.
This is not easy work. This is hard work. We do need to keep going. We need to support each other, replenish each other, nourish each other, catch each other up when our hearts are broken, and then get ready to go back in.
Yes. Well, our time is almost up. We've been talking to Christine Ashley and Grace Dodge from the Quaker Friends, talking about the FCNL, the Friends Committee on National Legislation, and ways that we can, how important it is for us to tell our story and be involved and let our legislators know how we feel about these such important issues. And that's so much better than just complaining and whining and and pacing up and down one's living room, having a little hissy fit. Go do something.
That's right.